The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. Now as Jesus and his disciples went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Martha, Martha. Don't forget, even though Martha gets kind of ridiculed and picked on a little bit, the passage does begin with Martha welcoming Jesus into her home. Martha did take the first step. Martha did say, "Come on in," but didn't quite catch on to what was most valuable. Martha, Martha. Yep, just stay on that laptop, woman, and miss the opportunities of bouncing around with that child who's on that sofa. Miss the opportunities of growing up with her. Miss the opportunities because you've got better things to do on that computer. It's interesting, isn't it? The things that we miss. I didn't know since the pandemic that babies no longer come with two hands, but I think they grow up, they're born, they somehow come out of the womb with social media opportunities attached to their cell phones that are already now a part of their body, genetically somehow morphed into it. And I didn't know that somehow minds have developed cognitively and that we've progressed so much further along that we don't even need turn signals on cars any longer. We're just supposed to know when that car in front of us is going to turn. How many of you have experienced that? Yeah, it was kind of comical, at least when I was experiencing it after I petitioned Jesus to enter in and smite them. Anyway, when I think about Martha, Martha, what I really think about is this, that the most exciting things that happen in my life, and maybe possibly yours too, are when you have eyes to see what's emerging because God is already at work. When you have eyes to see what's already happening, and you stop that futile drive for wondering how to fill in that blank of one day when I have enough retirement money, one day when I have enough houses, one day when I have a better car, one day when my kids are out of school, one day when my husband does this, or my spouse does that, or my kids do this, or my friends do that. When you stop that futility and you experience God right now, right here in the moment, and you're just simply willing to jump in and be a part of it. That's not typical. It's not how we work. But I can tell you this, that when the sentence was written nearly 13 years ago, it's how the most resilient, adaptable, and effective ministries will function in the emerging future. Resilience, adaptive, and effective. Those three happen when you have eyes to see what is already emerging right in front of you. That was written back in 2009, and in 2020, right, we had a pandemic, and all of a sudden everything had to stop. And that's how church did for most congregations. Most congregations in this synod just simply stopped. They were afraid of everything. And instead of saying, even though we might not be able to socialize, even though we might not be able to be in our sanctuaries, since when is being in the sanctuary church? It's a part of how we experience and can experience worshiping God. But this isn't church. Church is seeing what God is up to and joining in what God's up to. Seeing where God is smiling and daring to imagine and join in where God is crying. To think about what really matters. The most resilient, adaptable, and effective ministries will be ones that take each day at a time. That's when you're only thinking about paying attention to your neighbors, probing and finding out what their gifts and their passions are, and then inviting them to take part in what God is already up to. It's nothing new, nothing that has to be created. We can focus on this because we do live in a world that's characterized by mistrust, poor health, economic uncertainty, inflicted racial trauma, generational shifts, stress, disillusion of traditional pillars like organized education. You can get a PhD now in just about anything, including, the color of grass, probably, online. Office space and live gatherings. We can focus on that, or we can focus on this. We do live in a world with breathtaking medical technology, artificial intelligence, efficient farming, a move away from greed, and the beginning of green tech, as well as self-driven learning, diverse cultural projects. Now more than ever, there is room for leadership, and this call goes out to each of you, no matter what your age is, no matter what your experience is, no matter what you think you don't have. Take what you do have and go first. Dive in. 99% of people that when they see this screen, they see what? A dot. But yet look at it. It takes up less than 1% of that whole surface area. 99% of people, the research says, see the dot, and they don't see the white space. You have to train your eyes. I thought my mother was crazy when she sent me to a class with college students when I was still in high school. I thought my mother was crazy to tell me to go to this class because my comprehension was pretty good, but she had read that if you learn how to speed read, you can actually gain an ability to increase your level of comprehension. And I think she wanted me to do better as I would go on through school, but then also to hopefully go to college or whatever I was going to do. I didn't really know at that point. But she sent me to this class, so I'm in this class, and I'm the skinny little 98-pound little runner, and I'm with all these college kids, and I'm learning the science of speed reading. And it's really quite simple. When you have a sentence and the words go across the page, our eyes very naturally, for instance, in our experience, and my eyes will drift back, our eyes go to each word. We fixate. Our eyes and our brains have been trained to fixate and read each single word. And our eyes don't move forward. Our eyes keep leapfrogging backwards and forward, backwards and forward. So it takes a lot of time to read that. And I can tell you exactly how many times a sentence with 8 words you fixate because I just have to watch your eyes as you're reading that sentence. And you might have 9, 10, 11 fixations for 8 words. But when you learn how to read quicker and you train your eyes to see a different way, you group them. You just get a cheap novel, and every other word, every 2 words, you put a slash mark, and you train your eyes to group 2 words, 2 words, 2 words, 2 words. And then as you get better, it's 3 words, and then 4 words, and then you're looking at a sentence, and you're going down the page, sentence, 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 sentence. And in the end, you would say, how can you read that fast and remember what you've just read? You read more, you understand more, and you remember more. When you train your eyes to focus and see what you're wanting to accomplish, and that is, how fast can I read through this? And how can I increase my comprehension? Training our eyes to see in a different way takes time, takes discipline, takes energy. I can tell you this, I probably would not have completed what I've completed had I not been the nerd high school student with all the college kids, taking a class that my parents couldn't even afford for me to take. But I really thank my mother for that. Intentionality is critical for leaders. If you don't do something, you won't get any place. Yeah, but how do you know what to do? Too many organizations, and probably the organizations that you have worked for, that you've experienced, both for profit in your job and also in your volunteer work. How many meetings do you go to that you just seem to be spinning wheels, and no one just simply wants to pull the trigger and make a decision? When you are a leader, you have to be intentional and you have to pull the trigger and make a decision. Good, bad, indifferent. You do the best you can, but you have to make a decision. And you have to be aware of a concept that we call emergence. Anybody here trained in the natural sciences? Anybody go to school for science? Any science teachers in the room? If you're a science teacher, then you know that emergence is, that unpredictable things happen because of the interaction, because of the elements that you have in front of you. Now, you might have a suspicion that something will happen when you put this and this and this together, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen, because every single time you do that, the conditions change. So emergence is really critical. So if you train your eyes to see the white space instead of the dot, if you're trained to see emergence instead of predictable, the dot in the middle, what likely could happen? What's already happening in the room? Some of you have already tuned out, right? Because you don't want to put the energy and the work and the discipline into growing. But those of you who have caught on even the slightest bit, you're already wondering, what's Bob up to? Because I don't generally do a whole lot without a plan. But I'd like you to shift the words to, what's God up to? What is God up to in our circumstances right here, right now? Seeing through new eyes is critical. How many of you have looked into the eyes of your children and you know that that's the most precious thing you could ever look at? How many of you have experienced their eyes looking back at you, and then you recognize what's really the most precious? It's those eyes meeting. Quite simply, the disciples, when they began early on, they were given a few words, right? They had been given instructions to go into all the world, preach the gospel to all creation, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teach them everything that Jesus had commanded, and not to forget that Jesus was with them every step of the way. That was it. That was it, pretty much. So the first thing that happened for the disciples was they dared to set a course, just a direction. They dared to take that first step. They dared to take action. And then they did something additional. They stayed open to what was going to happen in front of them. And it was all because Jesus simply said, "You'll receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." It's really that simple. It's just not easy. It's the discipline of daring to set a course and then go. It's making a decision. As a congregation, will we stand for something? We won't please all people if you take a stand on something. But if you don't, I can promise you death. Because without action, you end up dead. But once you start to move forward, you have to have eyes to stay open to see what is emerging in front of you. In the past 3 weeks in our congregational leadership meetings, some would say, "Gosh, that was a mistake, that was an error, this is something we didn't do, we forgot to do this." But instead, our leadership team over the past 3 weeks, there's been one event after another event after another event where things weren't perfect. In fact, they were glitchy and goofy, and every single time people chose to see with new eyes. Every single time the Spirit shifted us to see how in the midst of the glitch, there's an opportunity for something even better. And the better isn't that we get a gold star on our shoulder because look what we did. The better is that we are more aligned with what God has always been up to. God has always been on a mission to set people free, to heal them, to reconcile them, to liberate them from their own thinking, and to join with them in doing the most spectacular things of all. But that takes commitment. To dare to take action. What if you take action and it's the wrong thing? Then you just simply say, oops. But what if you harm people? Well, that's inevitable. Then you say, I'm sorry. And then you forgive as many times as you have been forgiven. That's relationships. That's the foundation of the church. And again, remember how it all began. Jesus simply said, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you. How many of you know the Spirit of God is right there with you? You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, to the ends of the earth. In the midst of all circumstances, this morning, my plan was to get down here and to start to study a little bit more, and instead I had to worry about a flat tire, making sure that Jean can travel here safely. I started to get frustrated. My plans were being misdirected. My plans were being thwarted. I really wanted my cup of coffee. And instead, I'm talking to Subaru. And then I get a phone call. Actually, I didn't. The phone tried to call through. I'm on the phone with Wilkes-Barre. Jean's on the phone with Bonnie Moat saying, hey, I got a flat tire. Bonnie thinks she's alongside the road. She's at home, probably having my cup of coffee, waiting for the guy to arrive. And then he didn't even have the right tool. And so, in your lives, how many things do you think are not so good? Is she safe? Does it matter if the car is broken or not? And we're here together. Maturity is recognizing that we don't have control over anything. It's just an illusion. And planning is the same way. Most of our organizations in Northern America, in fact, most of the organizations around the globe, were designed to be predictable, right? There's an outcome. It's strategic planning. But everybody knows it doesn't work. But we keep doing it. That futility frustrates people, exhausts people instead of energizes people. I had no idea that when I would walk in this morning, I would see Aaron Martin in our sanctuary. And better yet, 2 little girls that I baptized. Girls, would you please come up? Seriously? Seriously, you were like a rugrat. Could you introduce yourselves? And you can ask your mom to come up too. This is Aaron Martin. Aaron Martin was the director of music at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Fleetwood. When I was there, please, say hi. Introduce the kids. Seriously, get over here. Get over. No. Okay. Be little again.
Hi, I'm Erin Martin. I was the choir director at St. Paul's, like Pastor Bob said, and yeah, I came on as a little 25-year-old, not fresh out of college, but out of college, and Pastor Bob was there when I got married and when my kids were born, and now they're a little bit bigger. And yeah.
We'll catch up a little bit afterward.
Yeah,
but I think that's when, guests in our midst. Were you welcomed?
Of course they were.
Good, good. They can welcome you some more outside in the fresh air with no COVID stuff, right? Yeah. Yeah, and I'll see you guys right after church.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. So good to see you. Emergence. What are the things that make you smile in your life? What are the things that make you cry? What are the things that God helps you smile about? Come back. Jesus' followers walked away with a sense of direction, and they began a journey together that would lead them places they could never have imagined. Could you imagine St. John's being where it is today? 10 years ago, would have you imagined that you would be where you are today? 2 years ago, would you imagine where you are today? We never had to worry about a thing. We had to trust that God was in control and simply see what was emerging in our midst. What are the gifts and talents in our people that have gone untapped for years? How would we know them if we didn't gather and get to know one another? But getting to know one another is scary. Getting to know one another means revealing things about ourselves that perhaps maybe we don't want other people to know. Like maybe we're not perfect. Maybe we fail. Maybe we make mistakes. Living together in relationship is challenging. I don't think the disciples had any clue that they were about to create the most influential movement in history. And yet they knew that they didn't make anything happen. They actually believed that the Spirit was at work in, through, and all around them. And when they saw the Spirit at work, they joined in. The text of Martha, do you see how it works? What did Mary do that Jesus commended her in doing? Sat at his feet and she listened. In our small groups, that's what I'm seeing happen. People are sitting together and they're listening to God speaking through books, through the words written by human authors, but inspired by God, along with Scripture, to open our eyes to see what's happening in our midst. How many of you, when you look at a glass, see half full? How many of you, when you look at a glass, see half empty? Would it surprise you that far more people see half empty in our culture than half full? Would it surprise you that in Tanzania, people see a glass almost always as half full? We are trained to think the way we think. It's my hope over the next few weeks, because I'm going to focus more and more on this, that you will see the connections between seeing through not new eyes, simple church, celebration of discipline, and discovering your spiritual gifts. It's my hope that what you will experience over the next few weeks is the soft, tender call that God has on all of our lives to share who we are, to not worry about what the world sees and values in us, but what we see and know to be our true value. What we have been purposed to do. Some of you who are in later years, maybe you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe you haven't even begun to tap into what God has actually purposed you to do. The grandmother of Juneteenth was in her 80s when she moved and created a march to acknowledge the freedom of the last people enslaved. In her 80s, when she set forth a movement that every single one of your calendars, and if you have an iPhone, it's on your iPhone, that happened because of an 80-year-old woman. If you think that in our congregation it's a certain age that will lead us forward, you're wrong. It's all of us recognizing our gifts and our talents and using them to God's glory. Do you have eyes to see? We didn't roll the clip here, but we used it the other night in class. How many of you have seen the movie Field of Dreams? Kevin Costner, Amy, whatever her name is, and that little kid. You've seen it? Only 3 of you have seen the movie? Well, then I'll explain it to you. In the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, he will come. And Kevin Costner then has to plow down his field in Iowa, and he creates a baseball diamond. Perfect. You know this one? You're smiling. Were you there? Were you at the baseball field? No? So anyway, so Kevin Costner, his wife, and this little child see the baseball players, see the field, but the relatives and others, they can't see it. Can you see every seat full in this congregation? Do you have eyes to see the pews full? Do you have eyes to see beyond the pews into our community and into the world? If you do missions trips, you will grow as an individual and as a congregation. If you don't, you won't. If you take our youngest ones and you mentor them and disciple them in community so that little ones know that they are safe, little ones hear from you and listen to what you have to say, and you model for them, if you do mentoring and discipling, you will grow. If you don't, you won't. It's what Jesus says. Dare to take action and go into the world. Teach, baptize, live the baptismal promises, live among God's faithful people. Serve and seek to provide justice and care and love for all. Loving God, loving people. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to, but I think I have to. I'm not done. Almost. Last night, when I was preparing the message, I was in the front room in our house. That's where my little study is. And I had a headset on because I know that I can get easily distracted. Would that surprise you? And I had my headset on. I was listening to music. And I know Jean was in the background probably cleaning up and doing laundry and getting dinner ready and all that kind of stuff. But I was able to focus, and what was helping me was hearing the happy music. And I knew that I was kind of inside of myself dancing. I was feeling energy. When I turned it off, my mood shifted. Dialing into and choosing a certain mindset took some energy. Pick the music, put the headset on, and participate with it. Action. When I turned it off, things went flat. What's emerging for you here at St. John's? Can you see a choir up front? Isn't that traditional church? A choir is up front and they entertain the congregation? Or will the new St. John's be, the next generation of St. John's, actually be what the choir has always been? Every voice in the room. You know who could teach you something about that? There are 2 people in this room, 3 people in this room that could teach you something about that. Aaron, Alex, and Rachel. They could teach you what it is to be a whole choir, all of you singing, and all you'd need is a worship leader, one voice, keeping the tempo so that the voices rise to the top. Doesn't have to be 14 people up front that don't smile. It could actually be, right? It could be all of us experiencing joy. Now, I got to tell you, Melissa, you never sat still when you were up there. And Jen Schlegel, I don't know if she knows what still is, right? That's like the bouncing ball. What's the next iteration for you of who we are in this room? Who will your teachers be among you? Who will you mentor? Who will you lead? Just some thoughts.